All right, so this is part four in my new series, re-ranking the top 60. I have gone through the top 22 or so, and then I sort of went back and said, got to come up with just a ranking system that does this more clearly, that combines all the kind of random number nonsense I've made into a few that I think really capture the different elements of players' careers and the different strengths that I really want to give credit to. I have a few final tweaks because, of course, I do. At the end of the last one, I decided I was going to weight career and peak higher than skill. I ended up moving it back to equal. Skill gives a lot of credit for strength of opposition, and I wanted to include that. Peak is kind of your win percentage and your kind of icons over a short period of time, done whatever's most flattering to you, whatever length, but the longer you can extend it, the better. Career is kind of these overall numbers of what's your, elo rating over your career. And skill is adjusted for specifically career is kind of what's your win rate over your career, and then skill really does the adjustments for for strength of opposition, which I wanted to include. I also did an adjustment on peak. Fundamentally, what I did is I've been doing a system where you must play at least 4 tournaments to qualify for the peak score, but I wanted to include players who had played 2 or 3, or in possibly one case, only 1 tournament, at least in consideration. But the fewer tournaments you've played, the easier it is to have a higher win rate or a high achievement rate. And so I wanted there to be some penalty, and I ended up basically you get a 5% decline for each tournament below 4 you played. This moved Doc down from the third highest peak ever to the fourth highest peak ever and did not impact his final standing at all. It dropped Karmazin 1 slot as another, very important example of a short-term player. So I think this is pretty small impact. I think someone farther down it dropped 3 or 4 spots, but the further down you get the rankings, the closer people are, so the easier it is to drop 4 spots without actually having moved much. So mostly not big impact, but I think it makes it a little fairer to people who do manage to perform for longer. And then I wanted to scale the final scores, sometimes how it would come out depending on how I weighted stuff. The top score was close to 100, sometimes it wasn't. With the adjustment back to each equally, it didn't come out close to 100, so I then scaled it at the end, so the top score would be close to 100, and someone who'd done nothing that's supposed to read would score a 10. So you kind of have a sense, someone's score is kind of their distance between around 100 is, say, the greatest of all time. 10 is someone who has not played a single tournament. Actually, probably you'd be a little lower than that without having played, but kind of that's the idea. And, if you score, 55, that's sort of halfway between those two standings is kind of the idea of where I wanted to go with. Maybe I should have set nothing to 0, but it wasn't exactly nothing, and I didn't want anyone to have negative scores, so I set it to 10. So those are the final tweaks. If you've paid attention to the last one, this probably makes more sense. If you didn't, that's fine. It's not too important. So then I want to talk about Piggyman and Tezuka, because I think they both have somewhat similar things. They're both non-winners coming into this most recent tournament. Pretty consistent careers. Like, they both certainly have, like, peak runs, and Tezuka is sort of a two-peak guy, where he peaks in 05, and then he plays pretty well for a while, and then he's peaking again now. Piggy probably at his best in 2011, but maybe peaking again now as well. But two players who, okay, Tezuka jumped in really hot. Piggy had a little bit of a slower start, but generally, you look at their careers and you're like, this is a consistently very, very good player. There's not really all that outstanding moments of their careers, right? Their best is not that much better than their worst. They're consistently very, very strong. And generally, both of them, if you look at the people I ranked near them on the last ranking, their average ratings are higher than the people around them. But their results are more spread out, and their peaks are a bit lower, right? If you look at, what's your best 4 or 5 tournament run, they're not necessarily ahead of the people near them. But if you look at over your career, what level did you consistently average, they're well ahead of the people next to them. So in some ways, they have kind of similar cases compared to the people near them. Now, if we look at what changed, each of them made their first final, and obviously with a finals run, you have a much higher chance to have a really big peak. And Tezuka won the finals. So this is great for kind of achievement and peak stuff. They each get a much clearer peak. They both hit their peak elo ratings during this tournament. Piggy's was reached entering the final. Tezuka's was reached also entering the final, but then he set an even higher peak by winning the final. For my overall peak score, Piggy moved up from having the 40th best peak to 27th. Again, he was rated in the last list 26th all time. Peak is one of the weaker parts of his case. His overall averages are incredible. And this moves his peak up to being kind of on par with where he was ranked, which means he's certainly moving up because his other numbers are so good. And Tezuka's win moved him from the 51st best peak to 24th, so slightly ahead of Piggy's. And where were they before? I had Piggy 26th, though the new numerical system has him 25th. The new numerical system is very similar to the rankings I came out with last time. And so, he's very similar. Tezuka, I had 34th last time, and entering this tournament, he was dropped to 36th. But there's a crowd in the 30s that's basically non-winners who really, really could be winners with just a few things different. He was right in the territory of Jadat, Midas, Grat, Mafiosi, that kind of player, right? The kind of players where if they were on a winner list, you'd be like, oh, of course. And they just happen not to be. And so we'll see how he can move from 34th or from 36th and how Piggy can move from 26th or 25th. But this really does fix the weakest part of their case. They also... I guess Tezuka picked up 1 win against winners. Piggy Man picked up 3 wins against winners. That helps both their win rates there against different levels of opposition. They both face difficult runs. They're really going to be helped in a whole number of places. Has anyone else moved since I last did this over a year ago? I've talked a bunch about Akiyama. Obviously, he has risen. Midas also moved up with his finals in Nephilim. Aesala has followed up nicely on his TTA C13 win with the semifinals. DJ has now made 4 straight icons. He didn't in TTAC, but he did right before that. And he's into the top 100 now. He's in 84th. That won't show on this list, but it is to say DJ has really been playing well and doing well and keeps rising. And, he beat Piggy Man in the last tournament, for instance. He's 2 tournaments ago in Nephilim. He's had really nice, steady play, and I've been really impressed. And then, of course, there's a lot of movement due to changing how I'm doing the rankings. Most players are fairly close to where they were. There's a couple people who swung 15 or 20 spots, but usually it's kind of in the pack where the margin they moved is actually not that big. It just happens to pass 15 people who were all close. But another thing is it made me more consistent in how I treat short and long-term players. So the people who moved a lot tended to be short-term players I didn't have a good grip on, or a good sense of, and the numerical system kind of solidified and clarified how I was going to grade them. And some moved up, and some moved down. And then the other big change, and this is the biggest change here, I think by far, is I'm finally giving real credit to both closed and Team Rhinoa dominance, especially to Team Rhinoa. I think that now, instead of being given very short shrift and occasionally slightly included, I think it is now given quite reasonable credit, not quite as much as the open majors, the non-team majors, but pretty close. And I think I'm now happy with how I'm scoring them, such that I don't feel in the future I'll have to give lots of caveats of like, okay, this is the score, but you should adjust for Team Rhino or you should adjust for closed. I feel good about this as a complete all tournaments in one score that credits short versus long term, peak versus longevity, all that stuff. I like how it does it, and we're going to get to the rankings. And I think the next slide, yeah, we got our first part of the rankings. So this is 60th versus 46th. I'm going to kind of slowly reveal. Board chart moves up, really nice run at the end. Slawio and Waltz, you'll notice, don't move at all. I have the arrows showing how much people moved from the last ranking, and the fact that 2 people are just exactly the same as the rankings I came out with, I think is kind of neat. So you can see the players' names, then their score on that scale that's kind of 10 to 100. And then the arrow up or down shows whether they moved up or down. If there's no arrow, that's because they did not move. And then the number is how many slots they moved. So board chart was 66th. He moves up to 60th. This is entirely from changes to the ranking system. Aurora, while still really good, only played 3 or 4 tournaments at the start, and the new system was not as impressed. Similarly, Beast Day, who I was just so impressed by him beating Doc Evil, the number system is not as impressed by kind of a single historical event. And while it certainly gives that a bunch of credit, it's not nearly as much as I did. Gafgarian, pretty good finalist from the kind of TTAC. Which finals did he get? I think TTAC 4. Patriot moved down a bit, which I was surprised by because he had such a good run in some Team Rhinoas and a deep run to a finals in a closed tournament. I expected him to hold steady. I'm a little surprised he dropped here. But you can see from the, 46 to 60th, the gap is 2.2 points. This is really small, right? By the time we get, the top 10 will be into the 70s, right? We're going to have bigger and bigger gaps as we go, and the margins here are quite small. Firebrand, early winner, short-term player. Coops, early finalist, lost to Seto in Triad Wars 5, let's say. Suikoden, winner of TTAC 5. Acela, winner of TTAC 13. Kazdan, one of those really consistent good performers that's, never made a finals, but has a couple semis and is clearly just very strong, consistent, good performance. I think sort of landed as a kind of weaker Piggyman Tezuka, where a low peak dropped him some spots. Sephiroth, once I adjusted for opposition, oh man, did he rock it up. This was a short-term player, kind of 0809, really when I was starting out, and just really, really good, and then disappeared. Very much a mini Great Sephiroth, which is, the easiest, most cliched thing to say given the names. But he also, Great Sephiroth's greatest skill, in my opinion, was his 2-minute open games. I think he was the best we've seen at that. You watch Akiyama now or Seto now, maybe they can compete. But for my money, Great Sephiroth at 2-minute open randoms was as good as it gets. And Sephiroth was like a worse version. Definitely worse. And definitely worse in the head-to-head. I remember that. But against kind of anyone else, he was really good at it. Amo drops a little bit, but still scores very high. Gambit really moves up. Another kind of consistent, steady tournament performer, but played a lot longer, and it was impressed by his longevity, I think. And that's our 46 to 60th. So let's reveal the next group. We have C17, another person who didn't play long, but was so strong in a short period that the numerical system was really high on him. You'll see the biggest moves are people like C17 and Beast Day and Sephiroth that are pretty short term. Gambit's the only, and maybe Patriot is the only really long term players that it thinks I got very, very wrong. Pogi, another short termer, really strong, basically just lost to Slash of Time a bunch and crushed everyone else. Made the finals of Rhinoa 4, I want to say. Unfixable, another early winner. And then Ace is the biggest jump of anyone. Now, I wanna tell you a little about Ace, because Ace played, I think, 2 tournaments. He came finals in a tournament right before the jump to TTA. But I don't include that in the records. But he played 1 early tournament, and he did well. And then he came back 4 or 5 years later for Vincent in 2008. And in Vincent, he goes under a pseudonym. In the first round, he beats Meta. And Meta was, I guess, the 3rd best player of 07. Both Delial and Seto were amazing that year. But Meta is probably the 3rd best player of 07 coming into this. Just has a fantastic year. Basically, his whole career is kind of late 06 through mid 08. Ace beats him first round. So he beats arguably the 3rd best player on the site at that point in time. Then he beats Kaori, then he beats Balls, and then in round 4, he beats Nightwish in Nightwish's first tournament. Now, Nightwish is a top 10 player all time. We might say, was Nightwish that good in his first tournament? Well, Nightwish had beaten Grat in round 2 and Kamikaze in round 3. So Nightwish was an incredibly worthy opponent to have beaten, even that early. He beats Feeling Lucky in the quarterfinals, and then he loses to Turds in the semifinals. This is not just an impressive semifinal run, but for someone who basically just hadn't played in 5 years is kind of insane. And once you get the opposition adjustment in there, he really starts rocketing up any kind of ranking you do. And he's one of the players that this numerical system really, I got to keep calling it that, but this scoring system, my Hall of Fame score, really identified as here's a player that even in such little time, we can be very confident is very, very good. You sometimes have people who played one tournament or two tournaments and they went deep in one of them, but this is one of those tournaments where it is really indicative of this is a player who would definitely continue playing at a high level. Then we have Torin. Then we have a bit of a jump, a full point jump. Have we seen a jump of a full point between two people before? No. I think the biggest jump up till now has been like 0.3. And the jump from Torin to Bryce is a full point. So a big jump to our top 40. Bryce, short-term player. I think the third best female player ever. And just really strong in short term. Also was a big part of some early Occult fan stuff, and I think some stuff around it, a lot of community stuff. In 39th, we have Dream Virus. In general, Dream Virus is somewhat easy to underrate because he doesn't have that many icons, but that's because he kept playing 7-round tournaments and going out 1 round before the icon round. And once you sort of adjust for that, starts looking really good. Homer, I'm actually a little surprised came this high because I had snuck him in at 50th last time and kind of felt like he's a good case for it. I'm not sure he's ahead of the people around him, but I like him. Let's put him 50th. And apparently, Homer's pretty close to, the kind of really high-end non-winners like Jadat. And, yeah. So that brings us to 36th, and I wanted to pause here and see how far has Tezuka moved. He started at 34th. He dropped down in this score to 36th. How far can he rise from 36th? Can he make it into the top? Has he moved up? Yes, of course he has. But has he moved up? Has he made it to 30th? Has he made it to the top 30? How far can he go? We will see. Will we see him when we see 31st through 60th, as we will in the next slide? If it goes, there we go. And no, we do not have Tezuka. Reanimator keeps moving up, which surprised me, but basically all his losses late on were to Great Sephiroth, which really helped in opposition adjustment stuff, and he kept beating pretty solid players and losing to like Great Sephiroth or Yojimbo, which isn't going to hurt him that much. Pretty surprised to see him among the top winners. I would certainly still rate, the Jadats of the world higher, but also Rei just basically got an icon in every tournament he played for like his last 6 tournaments before he left, and that's a really strong case. And then we have a huge 1.5 point jump to kind of solid winners like Bren and really, really good non-winners like Grat, Kefka, Metis, and Jaws. You can see Metis moved up to 32nd. He was 36th in the last ranking. He got finals in Nephilim. In one version of this, before some of the last tweaks, he would have made it to 30th, except that Tezuka booted him out of the top 30. So for a hot second, he probably should count himself as being top 30, but with the way I'm currently calculating it, he peaked at 31st here. But that is to say, he's had a very nice return, and the finals was really good for his case. Bren drops a bit. Really, really good peak run. I don't want to understate Bren's 2006 run. He gets a win, a couple quarterfinals around it, and a few other just nice results, not icons, but picking up a few nice wins. And then he basically drops off and kind of goes out round 1, round 2, most tournaments after that. And what I like about this system is it's able to say, okay, he didn't maintain that really high level, but he will get full credit for a really high peak. And that ended up putting him here right among kind of really top-end non-winners. And I guess let's get into the top 30. So one question for you. How high do you think Tezuka's going to go? I had him 34th. Where do you think he's going to end? And also, where do you think Piggyman's going to end? I had him 25th or 26th. How much can he move up? It gets harder and harder to move up. To get a sense of who was right in front of Piggy Man, I believe it was in some order. I think Meta was one ahead of him, then Scythe, and then Broccoli. Scythe meaning Serenity, the one with the S. Um, you know, that kind of player. So can he jump that group? Can he jump the next group? Or is that group all still ahead of him? We shall see. Well, if we look at 30th through 26th, we see Mafi Josie in 30th. Mafi Josie did really well in this system. His early performances are often it's not as impressed by because the opponents tended to be much lower rated. There were a lot of scrubs running around essentially. But Mafi Josie did it so well and for so long. He moves up a slot. Virgil wins the tournament, has another nice result. Short-term player, beats Seto in a finals. He moves up one. Kazik remains one of the best non-winners. He was really impressed by Ulti's time. And Serenity ends up dropping 3 spots, partly because Piggy and Tezuka both passed him. Another reason was Scythe was a little ahead of Meta, but when I added in Team Rhinoa stuff, Scythe dropped off. He had really poor performances there. And we're going to see a bunch of movement based on that. So we're into the top 25, despite the top thing saying 20th to 30th. There. Okay, ignore that. I screwed up something. But where are they? They have gone missing. And now, I think in the next one, we will find them. That's right. We have Tezuka moving up to 23rd from either 34th or 36th, depending on how you count it. And I kind of love this spot for him. I think this feels really right to me. We have Scythe and Meta, who are one-time winners. Meta has a win in a finals, but they're kind of separated, had a few runs a bit apart, had not too much in between. Scythe had a win surrounded by another finals and a semifinals, this really phenomenal 3-tournament run, but outside of that, hasn't really done very much. And so you've got this player who got a win in a finals in Meta in a pretty short period of time, though, a pretty short career that managed both of those feats. You got Scythe, who managed a little more and all right together, but played a long time at not a particularly high level. And then you have Tezuka, who's been at such a consistently high level and has now added that win so his resume can finally kind of stack up to theirs, and it just looks like he's the better, stronger player over time. Broccoli, another interesting case. She has the 2 wins, but Tezuka, again, has been just much more consistently strong. And what I really like here is Tezuka is next to D, because I think these are kind of similar. Tezuka appears in 2005 and immediately makes a semifinals, some deep runs, some really good performances. I think 2 semifinals and some other decent showings. D appears either in 2005 or 6, playing tournaments, makes like 2 semifinals, some really impressive runs. They have just very similar kind of resumes at that point in time. And then they go kind of up and down. They both go in and out of playing tournaments. And around 2010-11, maybe 11-12, D comes back really strong, starts knocking Yojimbo out of tournaments, the only person beating Yojimbo, and especially beating Yojimbo consistently, wins a tournament, then kind of trails off. Tezuka, comes in and out, keeps being steadily good, and finally, here in 2022, wins a tournament of his own. Tezuka has been the steadier player. You look at average performance, Tezuka is higher. Given who he was beating and how often, I think D's peak is the higher peak. But they're close, and they're both these 2 peak players split up by many years of good but less consistent results. Now, they do get their different ways. If I pop open the leaderboard on my screen, D is really... where would this be? Yeah, D is one of the weirdest players we've seen, because D's win rate against non-winners is 62%. For comparison, Broccoli's is 78%, Meta's is 85%, Scythe's is 68%, right? His 62% versus non-winners is really low. Tezuka's 78%. His win rate against winners is 47%, which is really high, given that you're likely to spend most of your time as versus winners playing against the best winners because they win more, so they keep sticking around to be played. And so most players, but especially even most winners, are under 50% versus other winners. So he's 62% versus non-winners, 47% versus winners. This is a way smaller gap than most players are. Tezuka's gap is he is 78% versus non-winners, that's 16% higher, and 37% versus winners, which is 10% lower, right? So they're certainly not the same player, right? D is this incredibly weird player who does his best versus the best and is not as consistent versus weaker opposition. Tezuka is a more standard resume kind of player, but they both have these two peaks. I think they look pretty similar in what they've done. I think Tezuka is clearly the steadier player, the one who's going to more consistently put in a good result. D seems a little more capable of the spectacular result, but I think them being next to each other feels really right to me. You look at what they've each done, I feel like they should come out close, and I'm really glad they did. So Tezuka moves up all the way to 23rd. He's in the top 25, and he's very much in the crowd of like, these are good winners. Like Scythe, Meta, Broccoli. Broccoli's a two-timer. D, Kaus. These are good winners, and he has moved firmly into that area and easily could keep moving up. So I'm really happy for Tezuka winning the tournament. And this feels like a round right for him. Where he was before was one of the really good non-winners, but not at the top end of the fantastic non-winners. But a good enough resume that as soon as he wins, he jumps up into, this is a really good winner, right? And I kind of think all those people in the really good non-winners would clearly be very good winners too. And I'm really happy for Tezuka that he got there. And oh man, did he earn it. Undefeated for a TTAC, best of 3 every round, never beaten, is ridiculous. Like, if anyone deserves their win, it's the guy who went, 8 wins, no losses on the way to his title. That's nuts. That's phenomenal. So, massive performance by Tezuka. The other big change here, and I should make sure my sound is working because I didn't actually test it. Oh, good. I always get worried when I think about that. If I'm mid-recording, is Piggy Man has really moved up too, right? Again, they both kind of, the weakness of their case was their peaks were so much worse than their consistent level of play, and now their peaks look really good, and so their huge consistent level of play really jumps them up. I think in some ways, like, I know I said I adjusted for Team Rhinoa, and we'll stop saying I haven't adjusted, but like, Piggy had good performances there, and he did not have particularly good teammates. So that was one thing that helped him, but just also, he's been a phenomenal player now for so long, so consistently putting in good results, not dropping matches he shouldn't. If we go back to that versus winners and versus non-winners resume, he's 42% versus winners, and he's 80% versus non-winners, which is, clearly, not that that's the only way to break down strength of opposition, and my stats here use more complicated and I think better ways, but that's a nice way to get a quick sense of, that's 2 to 6% higher than Tezuka against both. That's not that far behind D against winners, and it's way ahead against non-winners. He's a lower overall win rate than Kaus Debonair, but once you make the opposition adjustments, I think it's pretty clear he's a little bit stronger. Incidentally, Kaus, amazing career. Being ahead of Kaus is like just a phenomenal marker for any player. So I'm really happy for both Piggy and Tezuka. Tezuka moves into, he's a great and completely deserving winner. He's not a winner that feels like, that's a kind of random winner or happened to win when the field is weaker, or we'll have to see more to know that they're this good. No, we know Tezuka is this good. And Piggy Man really firmly sets himself as, just by, you can see a big margin here, not just 7 slots over ulti, but like 3.7 points of this is a pretty huge gap, as we can see looking at these charts. Sets himself very firmly as the second greatest player not to win. And I think until Chickeny came along, he had a decent case for best to not win. But, Kha'Zix's there, Mafi Josie's there, Jadat's there, Tezuka was there, Grat, Midas. There were a whole bunch in that conversation. And now I think, now that we can't make the case, hasn't made a finals, it's definitely Chickeny and then Piggyman. I'm doing a lot of babble here. I wanted to make sure I didn't fail to give adequate pressure to the credit to these players, because I'd talked so much about the top 20 over 3 videos that I wanted to make sure I talked about the other ranks too. Now, if we extend this to the top 11, we can see Turds has fallen to 19th. I would like to apologize for Turds. It also hurt me. The update, including Team Rhinoa, was not good for us. We did not play well there. We were a team once. We went out as quickly as we could in very bad fashion. Yevon absolutely destroyed us. His teammate, not great, and we couldn't get wins off him. Which moves Smokes up to 18th. This actually feels kind of fitting for the moment, because Smokes and Turds played in the quarterfinals, and Smokes snagged the win there, and I think if you flip that result, Turds would still be slightly ahead. So I kind of feel like that's a fun way to place those two. Cookie drops to 17th. I've been talking a lot about Cookie. Difficult to place. I feel that Sir Smokes and Turds should end up ahead of Cookie. I am okay with them not being ahead of Cookie yet. You'll notice this group is definitely ahead of Piggyman. Piggyman has really put himself 20th, I think, comfortably, but it will take a while to move in. It won't be easy to move into that top 19. You look at Turds, you have a 2-time winner. You look at Smokes, you have the all-time number 4 icon winner. You look at Cookie, you have a 2-time winner who legitimately had a case for greatest of all time at one point. I really have hopes for Piggy to keep rising, but I also want Turds and Smokes to rise. I want lots of people to rise. In 16th, we have Karmazin, always just really hard to rank. Now we have a number system. Every time I did this, I was going to argue with myself, where should Karmazin go? Now he just goes here, and I'm happy to be done trying to figure that out, because his 2 tournament run's fantastic, and how much can you take from that? I don't know. I think for what it's worth, I've said this before, but if we were doing kind of the top 10 most talented players, I think Doc, Evil, Nimloth, and Karmazin is a excellent top 3. Yeah. 15th, we have Chickeny. This may seem high for Chickeny, but oh god, his win rates are just so good. His strength of opposition is so high. His sustaining those win rates against that. No one lower than Chickeny has made more finals than Chickeny. I think only Turds has made more semifinals, and he's played so many more, 20 more tournaments, and has made like 1 more semifinals. No one except Smokes, I think, below him has more quarterfinals, and again, Smokes has played a whole bunch more tournaments. If we just ignore the are you a winner question, Chickeny clearly should be here, and maybe even higher. So we've ended up putting Chickeny this high. I think, yeah, Chickeny wins games, and wins games against really good players. And in a world where Yojimbo's not here to stop him anymore, I expect to see more deep runs from Chickeny, because that was basically his one weakness. And he also went up because, of course, he just made another semifinals to add to his already stellar resume, beating a player very high on this list at 13th. Sujiro drops to 14th. Sujiro was always tough for me to place. I felt he was clearly better than the group below him, clearly not as good as the kind of Koner, Kamikaze / Polish Brothers group. And these suggest maybe I had him closer to that good group than I should have, but still, excellent player, excellent, relatively short career. Again, one of those players that you think, they stick around, another few years. He probably is in that, top 12, probably firmly so, but he didn't. And so this is the record we have of Sujiro, but I have a huge amount of respect for Sujiro's play. and I think it's possible he's also pretty high in that kind of most talented player group. At 13th, we have Akiyama, firmly passing Sujiro. I will stop arguing about Sujiro versus Akiyama and feel maybe that I was being foolish to still have Sujiro ahead. Akiyama's incredible player. In 12th, we have Vid, and I think this is the big surprise because as I was going through the previous videos, I was sort of like, Vid's really good. I should really start comparing him to like Sujiro and Akiyama, and like maybe he's just better than the kind of cookie smokes turds cows type group. And it just kept being like, whatever number I look at, he's near the top of this group. And it turns out you add up a ton of being at the top or being near the top, and you get a player who's just clearly ahead of that group. And I'm really surprised. I did not expect to have Vid ahead of Sujiro, and he's ahead of Sujiro by a decent margin here. It was helped by being really good in the Team Rhinoas. He won the first closed tournament, so he was really good there too. And giving full credit to those was really boosted his case. But Vid actually, like, sort of maybe like a Deli-like case of just kind of whatever way you cut it, he comes out really good. Like, you look at me and you say, how'd I do in Team Rhinoas? And you go, oh, not good, you know? And just kind of any way you look at Vid's case or any way you look at Deli's, you're like, oh, that's really, really, really good. And Vid's just added up to being 12th. So again, that's a few spots higher than I expected, but man, incredible run by Vid. And in 11th, we have Koner, falling out of the top 10. And the reason for that is because someone else with the inclusions, and they had a nice recent result, though I don't think that's what put them over. But I'm happy to say, because he said I had underrated him in the last one, though he was okay with it, Slash of Time has moved into the top 10. And I think that is because I have finally given adequate credit to his truly incredible Team Rhinoa performances, where he just had so many fantastic runs. He didn't win, but I still think his best one, and I think he agrees, is his Rhinoa 5 run, which is just, like, maybe the coolest tournament run ever. He was teamed with Demonic, a good, but, you know, not greatest ever type player, and they beat Random Hero and Poetic Justice in round 1, but then they beat Koner and Scythe in round 2, then they beat Foyer and Grat in round 3, they beat Yojimbo and Great Sephiroth in the quarterfinals, they beat the Polish brothers in the semifinals, who had knocked out the Seto Delial team. And that's just one of the insane runs where, like, no one expected this. So, really cool run, and I am happy to see Slash make it into the top 10 of this ranking. Some gap to Kamikaze. I had said Kamikaze and Koner were really close, so this is a pretty big gap between them. But once Team Rhinoas were included, the gap really grew, and Kamikaze probably should be a little ahead anyway. MC dropped a bit. Not good Team Rhinoa showings. Doc Evil, this feels a bit low, but also, as you saw from the last things, Nightwish and Great Sephiroth have absolutely insane resumes. And for a while I had been on MC's probably a little better than Nightwish overall. Now I'm firmly on, no, Nightwish is an absolute terror at this game. Nightwish, you know, didn't play that many tournaments. You give Nightwish another, you know, he played like 20, right? You get him into the 30 plus range where, you know, or even like 29 where I think Seto is. This is a person who could be knocking on top 4. Could be. I think probably still a little out, but could be. And quite similar for Great Sephiroth, who will, spoilers, be our 5th placer. So Doc Evil down to 7th feels a bit like heresy. I do think he's one of 5 places who have a legitimate case for greatest of all time. I don't think there's a way to argue Great Sephiroth or Nightwish for best ever. And I do think there's a way to argue Doc Evil for that, very easily actually. But I think overall, Great Sephiroth and Nightwish did so much in their limited time. I'm finally giving Nightwish full credit for his incredible Team Rhinoa performances. And I actually kind of like the list with them ahead of it. I wouldn't really have thought, ahead of Doc Evil, I wouldn't really have thought to do it on my own list. But when I put the numbers and they spit this out, I thought, yeah, this feels right. This feels like Doc Evil may be kind of higher talent, but if we're going to take the overall careers, it's all good to me, and I hope it seems reasonable to you too. I really put a bunch of effort into the rating system here. I tried to only tweak it minimally once I had seen results. As I said, I did make a few tweaks. They did not affect much, though they did affect something we're about to see in the top 5. So actually, let's show the full 1st through 30th. Here's the full 1st through 30th. You can see our top 4 well ahead, and really clearly a 1-2, a 3-4, and then kind of a 5-6 here. Delhi passed Seto for a moment, because Delhi, when I added in Team Rhinoa and closed, both of them were like, oh man, Delhi's like the best at these formats too. And then I did an adjustment. Oh, it says 3 for Delhi as well. It should say 4 there. But I did an adjustment. One of the tweaks dropped Delhi back down slightly under Seto. I think they're really close. I still think there's a case for all 4 of these players greatest of all time. And just if you kind of take across the board, yeah, Delhi looks great. But I think Seto and Delhi are 3rd and 4th. And depending kind of when someone's within a few points of someone, if I had tweaked the ratings a different way, I could have easily gotten it to flip. This is to say, I could have gotten this one to flip if I, was trying to cheat here. I was not trying to cheat. I do think Seto's a little ahead. I did come to that conclusion there. But it's close, and if Delhi's the next one with a great run, Delhi could easily be ahead here. And then for a top 2, with I think a pretty clear margin at this point. We've often come out really, really close in my rankings, and then I've sort of gone, maybe if you include Team Rhinoa, Yojimbo goes up a lot, but tried not to focus on it because I like to think of myself as the best, and once you include that, it becomes pretty hard to argue for me. But I think I should say, I think right now Yojimbo is the GOAT. I think I'm likely to grab the title by this scoring system. At some point, I've played 21 tournaments. Yojimbo played 36. I think I have a very good chance if I keep playing well and actively. And I'm probably taking a little break because I don't like how I'm playing right now, and I want to be really enthused next time I compete. So I'm probably not going to play the next tournament or 2. But hopefully, when I come back, I will be in form where I can snag that spot. It's not a huge lead, but it's not a tiny lead that will be trivial to pass either. So hopefully I get there, but for now, can say Yojimbo is the greatest of all time. And I would break down some of the numbers there, but I think we've talked enough about the big 4. So here's our top 30, and I feel pretty good about it. I think it has the correct 1 and 2. I think it has the correct 3 and 4. I'm into this hot take that Great Sephiroth and Nightwish are pretty clear 5 and 6. I think there's a good chance that's just right. I like seeing Slash in the top 10. I think Slash is a player my numbers have underrated. And even if they still do, it's probably not enough to move him past Kamikaze. So I feel really good about that spot for him. Seeing Vid at 12 is just cool. He kept having good cases everywhere, but I kept not focusing on it enough to realize how good the case was. Akiyama's at 13 and still rising, though he has now played almost as many tournaments as Sujiro, not that many fewer than Nightwish, not that many fewer than was up either. So we'll see where he continues to move. Chickeny continues to be really strong player. Nice to have him still going. Cookie played the last tournament. It would be fun if he had a big comeback. Smokes and Turds, both earning icons. Piggy Man with his new finals. Tezuka, our new winner, and very deserved. What a run. Yeah, we still have a lot of this very strong group around and some other players who might well break into it. So that's the current top 30 and the current top 60. I hope you liked it. If you think there was some big omission, let me know. I almost certainly checked whatever players you're thinking I omitted, but I can let you know what it was they scored lower in that dropped them down. I've checked about 150 players. There are about 800 players that have played tournaments, but many are kind of 1 or 2 tournaments and didn't win any games. So I've checked, I think, everyone who has a legitimate chance to be in the top 60. I definitely have not checked everyone that has a legitimate chance to be in the top 100, which is why I didn't include that here, because there's still some people I should probably check. But yeah, I feel really good about this ranking, and I hope you enjoyed it. And also, it means when there are new tournaments, I'll just be able to update, and you can let me know, ask me, like, who moved, and I can tell you, Sujiro came back and he won the tournament. Sujiro has moved up to 11th or whatever, right? Just picking on a random person. Kazik came back, he moved up 1 slot for his quarterfinals finish, moved up to 60.3 and passed Ulti. That kind of thing. It'll be easy for me to update and let you know if you want to know where someone currently stands. And we can check in. But this is the current rankings after TTA 14. Now that it is published, I will do no more tweaks to the ranking system. I tried to get it as good as I could, and I don't want to adjust it in ways that are like, oh, so-and-so's underrated, I should credit them. It might have A, unforeseen consequences, and B, I think the ranking's pretty good. So, okay, I'll stop babbling here, and cheers.